नमस्कार, आप देख रहे हैं खबरें दनादन और आपके साथ में हूं रुमान अलवी। और आइए आपको सीधे लिए चलते हैं हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स लीडरशिप समिट 2017 में, जहां अमेरिका के पूर्व राष्ट्रपति बराक ओबामा इस वक्त मौजूद हैं।
They're always based on gender, and that's one of the things we need to focus on, is making sure that because that's universal within all camps. And if you examine the course of human progress, where we have progressed is where we have reduced and if not eliminated the barriers of these artificial distinctions, so that the reason you can have an outstanding business person who didn't simply inherit everything but built it themselves is because you have different rules now than in feudal times about who could aspire to enter into an enterprise. The reason that I'm sitting here is because somebody worked hard to reduce the barriers that said somebody who looked like me could not aspire to a certain office of leadership. And there's a counter-narrative taking place at all times, but I think it's particularly pronounced now. You're seeing it in Europe, you're seeing it in the United States, and sometimes you see it in India, where those old tribal impulses reassert themselves. And there are leaders who, I think, try to push back against those impulses, and then there are those who try to exploit them. And I want to make sure that we are encouraging as much as possible those voices that remind us that we work well together when we recognize our common humanity. And particularly in a country like India, where you have such an enormous Muslim population that is successful, integrated, and thinks of itself as Indian. And that is unfortunately not always the case in some other countries, where a religious minority nevertheless feels a part of. I think that is something that should be cherished and nurtured and cultivated. And I think that I think all far-sighted Indian leadership recognize that, but it's important to continually reinforce it.
President Obama, you began your answer very interestingly, and I want to pick up on it. You said this message that everyone has the right to practice the faith of their choice, and nowhere is it more important than India, is a message you've given not just publicly to the world, but privately to Mr. Modi. And I want to ask you, what was his response? How did he take the message? And I'll pause a moment and tell you why I asked, so you can answer both halves of the question together. You're aware that the Western press increasingly in the last 3 years, particularly since your speech in 2015, have been portraying India as a country where intolerance is growing. They talk about beef bans, they talk about cow vigilante lynchings, they talk about love jihads. So when you gave this message in private to the Prime Minister, there are many here who'd be keen to know, what was his response?
Well, he's a very good journalist. I think it's fair to say that my goal here is not to disclose every private conversation that I have with other leaders, but I think his impulses are to recognize the importance of Indian unity. I know that he firmly believes in the need for that in order to advance to the great nation status that India possesses and will continue, I think, to amplify in years to come. But as I said before, I think it's very important to understand this is the work of all of us. Yeah, one of the things that I say in my farewell address in the United States is that the most important office in a democracy is not the office of president or prime minister or governor or mayor. It's the office of citizen. because by definition, each of us have a responsibility in order to make our democracy work. And I think that obviously those of us, like myself when I was president, even post-presidency, Prime Minister Modi, others, our voices have more reach, and we have an obligation to deliver these messages. But it's the task of all of us to reinforce it. One thing I will say about politicians as a general rule, this is not directed at any, because I know there's some in the audience who are, I'm sure, outstanding public servants. So this is directed at me, it's directed at every elected official. Rarely do elected officials get out too far ahead of public opinion. And so if you see a politician doing things that are questionable, one of the things, if you're a citizen, is to ask yourself, am I encouraging or supporting or giving license to the values that I'm hearing out of the politician? Because, frankly, politicians tend to be more of a mirror and more a reflection of forces in the society. Every once in a while, they get out ahead and actually lead, but oftentimes they're reflecting. And so if communities across India are saying we're not going to fall prey to division, then